I got to meet Dr. Lyla June actually at Oxford. It was like a random meeting and event, and I was so inspired by her talk. And so it's a real honor to have you here, all the way from Turtle Island to join us. I think many of us know Dr. Lyla June. She's a poet, a singer, songwriter, hip-hop artist, human ecologist, public speaker, and community organizer of the Diné, and Tsétsêhéstâhese, the Cheyenne and European lineages. Her multi-genre presentation style has engaged audiences really across the globe towards personal, collective, and ecological healing. Her messages focus on Indigenous issues and solutions, supporting youth, intercultural healing, historical trauma, and traditional land stewardship practices. She blends her study of human ecology at Stanford, graduate work in Indigenous Pedagogy, and the traditional worldview she grew up with to inform her music, perspectives, and solutions. Her doctoral research focused on the ways in which pre-colonial Indigenous nations shaped large regions of Turtle Island, aka the Americas, to produce abundant food systems for humans and non-humans. Her internationally acclaimed live performances are coveted through the medium of speech, hip-hop, poetry, and acoustic music. Personal goal is to grow closer with Creator by learning how to love deeper. And I can't think of a better keynote to end our powerful conversations and community work to bridge Indigenous cultures across, Moananui-a-Kea, the Pacific, and to learn from Lyla and her community. So, aloha nui, welcome.
So, today we are going to talk about the wild and adventurous world of Indigenous regenerative food systems. And I call the dissertation Architects of Abundance to really push against this notion that we are merely hunter-gatherers of a natural and accidental and wild bounty of the earth, and to show that we are and have always been, in fact, intentionally designing this abundance, architecting this abundance. And so that's why it's also called the excavation of hidden history, because it was really important for the colony to minimize or omit or even erase our heritage as gardeners of the earth, because it sort of pointed to our sophistication as cultures, which made it challenging for them to legitimize our wholesale slaughter as savages and non-humans, because we clearly had these very sophisticated systems all around, from which they benefited from greatly, right? Anyways, this picture is a picture of the Florida riverbanks, and it's oyster shells. These are real archaeological sites that we find around Florida. And I like this picture because it shows the bounty. And we know by analyzing these shells that people were harvesting oysters from the Florida riverbanks for thousands and thousands of years. Of course, this is an artist's rendition, but these are real archaeological sites that we find. So today I'm just going to go through a series of examples of ways in which Indigenous peoples have really influenced the way that the land looked and tasted. Regional scales. I loved what they said earlier today. This wasn't like a little fish pond, this was like an 11-mile fishery, anthropogenic fishery, co-created by human hands. So on the left, you might see a familiar picture. I give this talk, by the way, across the country all the time, and I always do a shout out to the Ahupua'a system, which of course is a gorgeous anthropogenic food system wherein human beings not only got everything they need to support huge populations here, as you know, but took care of and nourished the earth at the same time. I'm just gonna go through a few examples today. I like to tell stories. I feel like that's a great way to teach. So I'm just gonna go through some stories today. So the first story I wanna talk about is the Shawnee chestnut groves, particularly in what we now call Kentucky. But these chestnuts once grew from Maine all the way down to Georgia. And the colonists initially thought that this was a wild, accidental, natural chestnut phenomenon. But now we know by examining fossilized pollen records that these groves were not only planted by human beings, but depended on human beings for their dispersal and maintenance. So on the left-hand side, you see the chestnuts, and those supported immense, dense populations all throughout the East. This was like the corn of the East, or the poi of the East, or the you got that one. Like, That's all I needed to say. This was very important to the people. And unfortunately, it was wiped out by a blight. These trees had a fungus that wiped them out, because when they wiped out indigenous peoples, the forests didn't have people to thin them, didn't have people to burn in between them, which was part of the maintenance. And they grew too close together, and that facilitated these diseases, which I'll explain why in a second. But on the left, you see a Cherokee or Tsalagi family with one of their relatives, one of their old-growth relatives, these chestnut trees that to them was as equal as a grandmother or a grandfather. They would care for them in that way. And to the right is an artist's rendition of an old chestnut tree that is allowed to be a tree. And that's really important, because when all these little nuts here on the left drop and they create saplings, and you have lots of chestnut trees coming up together, they're not allowed to just have space like this tree on the right-hand side. They start growing really close together, and they start to grow tall and skinny, fighting for the canopy. So in a lot of trees, when you have a lot of trees per acre, 100 trees per acre, 200 trees per acre, they are all taking up the limited water, nutrients, and sunlight that exist in that specific area. And they accidentally choke each other out. And that's one reason why Mother Earth has always needed us as human beings to go in and garden her, thin her, just like you would if you planted a row of taro and there was so many bunched up, you would probably need to thin it out a little bit, right? Help them have some space. Well, we would do that with the chestnut groves. And so we would have roughly 13 trees per acre, very chill, not a lot of trees. And so you could burn in between those trees, you could burn the forest floor without causing catastrophic fire, because there was not enough organic material to catch on fire. All you had was the grasses. And so we know through a graph I'll show you here in a second that indigenous peoples were burning around the chestnut trees for 3,000 years straight. And they were doing so not only to keep these, like if these little nuts hit the ground and started growing a sapling, that fire would knock out that sapling and keep only the old growths going. But the fire would also recycle the nutrients. When those dead plant tissues are burnt, they turn into nutrient-dense ashes. And that goes into the soil system, stimulates microbial activity. And you've probably heard this idea of like, after the fire, there is new growth, right? Because that ash is so fertile. And so we would constantly be burning, keeping the fuel loads down. And the colonists always were saying, wow, it looks like a park. It looks like a splendid park-like area. And they would say, it's almost as if, someone did this on purpose, And by the time a lot of people started writing history about the East, we had already been largely wiped out, because the Norse had come before the English and done some damage to our populations as well. The Norse came out, I want to say it was, 400 years before Columbus, and did a number on our populations. So anyways, that's all to say that these were human-managed systems. And we were so good to the earth that she needed us, to the point where when they wiped us out, the system started to collapse. And in that sense, human beings were a keystone species, or a species upon which whole ecosystems depend. And I believe that's our human heritage, that's our human purpose, and that we can reclaim that once again. So I'm going to show you a graph, but don't be alarmed. It's okay. It looks scary, but I'll walk you through it. Okay, so this is a graph of fossilized pollen. So on the left-hand side, let's see if I have a red dot. Oh, I don't have a dot. It's okay. So on the left-hand side, you'll see time. It goes from 0 years to 9,500 years ago. And the oldest sediment is at the bottom, right? Because this pollen falls on the surface of ponds, and it'll go to the bottom of the pond, and it will go to the mud, and it will preserve. And so for millennia, that's happening, right? And so you have these layers of pollen, which can help you to reconstruct the vegetative history of an area. So this is a 9,500-year-old soil core. You can see that red line is about 3,000 years ago. And you see where it says chestnut, I guess it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth type of species on the right, next to hickory nut and black walnut. You see chestnut coming out of nowhere about 3,000 years ago. You also see hickory nut coming out pretty strong around that time. And then black walnut you see coming in about 2,000 years ago. And they also see some domesticated edible plant species towards the right-hand side of sunflower, goosefoot, sumpweed. These are all food plants of the indigenous peoples of the region. And on the very right-hand side, you have fossilized charcoal. And you see it coming on really strong and steady there about 3,000 years ago. And you see this biodiverse food forest sustained for 3,000 years. And it's really quite remarkable that they never destroyed it all that time. Of course, until the early 1900s when the chestnuts were wiped out. So that's one example I like to talk about of how human beings would space the trees properly to facilitate their health and burn in between. And that burning, I should have mentioned, also attracts deer and bison and elk, because after you do a burn of a grassland, it comes back really fresh and nutrient-dense grass, and herbivores love that. So you'll attract all the deer, so you have your chestnuts to eat, and then you have your deer to hunt right there too. So the deer fed us, and it was our job to feed them by burning the prairies to make sure those yummy grasses would keep coming back for them. Another example I like to talk about is the Quaquaw clam gardens. These are in the Pacific Northwest, and these are intertidal rock walls that they would build along the shoreline. And these rock walls would create calmer, warmer pools on the shoreline side. And that would actually be perfect for clam habitat. So we know that these are at least 3,500 years old. These are ancient clam gardens. On the right-hand side, I don't know if you can see that thin kind of black line, but that's a man-made rock wall. And so probably somewhat similar to the fish ponds around here, I don't know. But when you build this wall in the intertidal zone and the tide comes up, that rock wall is going to get fortified because it's going to catch a bunch of sediment when the tide goes down. And it's just going to create a nice wall that on the shoreline side creates these beautiful pools. And Quadra Island is quite large. And each of those red lines there is where we find these ancient clam gardens. And they found that human beings augmented clam habitat through this technology by 35%. So what's really important about this example is that when they build the clam gardens, they're not just building it for human consumption. Very, very important. They're building it because the raccoons, the minks, the water birds, all kinds of different animals are going to come and feed off of these clams and other different species that proliferate in these pools. And this is intentional. Not only do the native peoples see that they are feeding all life when they build these clam gardens, but they even see that they're giving the clam a home. The clam supports so many things. And they even see the clam as having its own nationhood status. And so I've come to think that when we can look at a clam and not only see it as our equal, but see it as having its own nation, we will finally be civilized again. And when we not only see that clam as equal, but as our family, that's when we'll be mature and intelligent species once again. Until then, we're still going to be like that kid in the grocery store pretending they're the center of the universe when they're not, screaming and yelling around. Our ancestors of all nations, of all races, had this intelligence, this kin-centric intelligence, this notion that we are kin, and centering our kinship with all life, centering our kinship and our relationships with all life. The next thing I'd like to talk about is grassland pyromanagement. So this is a quote from a scientific article. The Illinois Confederacy shaped and altered much of this region as an anthropogenic creation. Like many other indigenous groups in North America, their most important tool was fire. Burning the prairies, they made the grasses hospitable for grazers and managed the prairie as a game reserve to maximize productivity. So what that means is by constantly burning off the grasslands, you are actually, again, bringing that ash into the soil. You're speeding up the composting process. In the fall, once the grasses have all died, instead of letting them slowly die and take another 2 years to compost, you're burning it and you're mineralizing all of those plant tissues into bioavailable nutrients that the soil can use right away. So you're also keeping the fuel load down. If you don't burn for hundreds of years, which is what has happened in what we now call the United States, you have the fuel load build up, and it becomes a tinderbox waiting to catch on fire. And again, you have the shrubs and the trees growing. They don't ever get beaten back down, so they really become a thicket and dry each other out, and that's kind of a recipe for a catastrophic fire. So this pyromanagement applied fire in gentle, systematic ways that helped it to not ever get too out of control. Fire is so important in our land management systems that the Mi'amia Indigenous Nation has a lunar calendar, and the September moon is called the grass-burning moon. The Mi'amia are a beautiful people, indigenous to what we now call the Ohio River Valley, and they are awesome, doing amazing language revitalization efforts in Ohio right now and just kicking butt in general. But you can see how burning was so important to our people for thousands of years that it was institutionalized within our calendrical systems. To that ninth full moon of the year, you know it's time to go out and burn. And this is a publication that the Mi'amia put out. They said, in Sashakayolia Kilswa, or the grass-burning moon, we see fire as something that restores and gives new life to the prairie. Fire helps clear the land of old grass and brush and opens seed pods that have fallen to the ground. Because of fire, new flowers and plants emerge in the spring. And so there's a lot of seeds that became pyro-adapted that needed our fire to germinate. And so it's very exciting to think that we can bring back this ash to these ecosystems, and it is happening in a lot of indigenous communities, this revitalization of what we call cool burns or good fire or cultural fire that are intentionally applied to help heal the land. My brother did an A/B test at his farm. He burned half the field and he didn't burn the other half. And literally within 2 months, the one that was burned had twice as high grass and plants growing than the one that wasn't burned. So I was like, oh, cool, it does work. The book on the left is really nice. It's written in 1908. I suggest it for anyone interested in indigenous land management. He goes state by state across the country, showing how indigenous peoples were always burning, not only to heal the soil, not only to keep grasslands going, not only to thin the forest, not only to cycle nutrients, not only to attract grazing animals, but also to facilitate with traveling. You know, sometimes it's hard to travel through a thicket where there's no way to get through the forest. The right-hand side, you see the bison. This is in Texas, what we now call Texas. And that fire was very much a part of supporting bison populations, which are famously one of our greatest food sources. They always imagine indigenous peoples, you know, chasing the bison with a bow and arrow. Well, now we know that bison were chasing us. They were chasing our fire, which opened up bison habitat as far east as Pennsylvania and as far south as Louisiana. So we're really reclaiming this continent not as a wilderness terra nullius with a few scattered hunter-gatherers, but really as an artifact of human ingenuity, of human love, of human care, of human cultivation. If we go to South America, we have the Mebengocre people, also known as the Kayapo, and their soil management system, which is also known as Amazonian dark earths, also known as terra preta. But on the left-hand side, you see this really thick horizon of soil, which is completely anthropogenic, meaning if it were not for humans, that that dark, loamy, nutrient-dense soil horizon would not exist. And that took thousands of years to make. So in the middle, we see a man, Kayapo man, Mbengokre man, showing off his black, loamy soil that his ancestors have been working on for a long time. And after he harvests all this cassava that he's growing, he's going to burn that field. And he's going to put that ash right back in. And if you look on the left, you can kind of see the pottery shards in the soil. So after their pottery was expired, they would break it and put it into the earth. And that would support with water retention and other things. So it's kind of cool. You can actually see this human fingerprint, this human signature in the earth as a loving offering, as a poem to the earth. On the right-hand side, every single black dot is where we find Amazonian dark earths. So you can see this, and there could be many, many more. In fact, certainly there are. These are just the ones well, when I say we, I mean mostly white scientists have documented. But this just gives you an insight into the scale and the influence with which these people had on the soil systems. This is not just a tiny little spot, right? This is like a fourth of the entire continent of South America, where human beings augmented the life-bearing capacity of the land. And it turns out that sort of brown clay layer below the black layer is the nutrient-poor soils that you often find in Amazonia. I didn't know that Amazonia actually has some pretty nutrient-poor soil systems. That's probably why people had to come in and do these amendments over thousands of years. So in that sense, people are really realizing, again, the Amazon rainforest, as we know it, was co-created by human beings over thousands of years. They just found a 25,000-year-old cave painting in South America. So we know people have had a long time to work with this. And we also know we didn't come across the Bering Strait because that was supposed to be 15,000 years ago. So we're rewriting history left and right in indigenous science. It's pretty exciting, actually. All the things that was taken for granted by white scientists is just pretty much being debunked left and right, but in a good way, in a regenerative way that will help all people and help us all to remember each of our regenerative roots. So the Baure are an indigenous folks from Bolivia, and they create these floodplain aquaculture systems. And on the left-hand side, you can see these raised earthen berms that are put in the form of funnels for the fish weir. So in the rainy season, when the water comes up and the water recedes during the dry season, these funnels will catch water and fish into ponds. And along those berms, they would plant, I say they would because it has been largely decimated through colonization. They would plant fruit trees, which would attract game animals. And apparently there was also a lot of snails. So you have your escargot, you have your fruit, you have your game animals, you have your perennial supply of fish. On the right-hand side is artist rendition of the canals that were built. This is Venice is the Lahaina of Europe, then the Baure is the Lahaina of Bolivia. Some of the things that we see still today after 500 years of weathering in Bolivia. We see causeways and canals. We see settlement mounds that were built up so when it flooded, their settlements wouldn't flood. Forest islands, where there was just islands, raised islands built by human hands specifically just for fruit tree production. Then we have ring ditches we find. Raised fields there in the middle where they would do some agriculture so it wouldn't get flooded. Those little circles are the fish reservoirs, and then the funnels are the fish weirs, training the fish to go into the fish ponds. So this was a place of great abundance, and there are about 2,000 Baure people left on the planet who gravely need our support. Beautiful people, and their language is still being spoken, but by very few. So they really need our support in every way we can. This is satellite imagery of some of these, again, 500 years of weathering. We can still see these things from, not satellite, aerial imagery. This black dotted line is the area with which the area they managed. So this is a huge, huge chunk of Bolivia. Again, not a little tiny project. This is a regional scale management of floodplains. This is my people's area. So I'm Diné. I'm from the Tsétsêhéstâhese clan of the Diné Nation. We get our clans from our mothers, not from our fathers, so we get our last names from our mothers. So that's my mother's clan. And our neighbors, the Shiwi or Zuni, also practice this. But when you're in the desert, water is precious. And so we would plant our fields at the base of small watersheds. You can see on the left all those crops were planted, and a little ephemeral dam was constructed to slow down the water when it would come. So the one time we get water is during the monsoons in August and September, and it just torrential desert rains. It's quite beautiful. So when those rains come, and you're a desert creature like me, you want to be ready to catch it and store it in the earth. So we would plant our fields in these alluvial plains, and we still do today, I should say. And it's through that we would turn deserts into gardens. You can see the corn being grown on the right-hand side in this alluvial plain. And what's really fascinating about this system is not only when the monsoon rains come does it bring irrigation, it also brings nutrients, because it's bringing all of that nitrogen and phosphorus from the upland soils down into the alluvial fan. So that's why we could plant year after year after year in these alluvial fans, because we never had to go fallow, because it was constantly getting regenerated with fertilizer. Every single rain, it would bring more of that loamy soil down from the mountains. So it's pretty beautiful, that system. I like to talk about the Australian folks who built these eel farms 6,000 years ago. This is a basalt rock eel farm. So the eels are, as you may know here, is there eels here? Yeah, okay, sorry. Many eels here. So the eels are a catadromous species, meaning they're like the opposite of salmon, where the salmon will go up to the freshwater, lay their eggs, and then swim out to the sea or the ocean to mature, and then they'll come back to lay eggs again. So the eel are the opposite. They will be born in the sea, and they'll come into fresh water to mature and hang out. So, when these guys are here for 60,000 years, they're probably noticing, oh, wow, here's the eel again. Oh, there's the eel again. Oh, the eel are coming back. So then they realize that they can support these eel populations. So they'll create little eel nurseries. They'll create little eel holding ponds. On the very right is an eel trap. So they like to say, look, we weren't hunting and gathering eel. We were harvesting eel from a system that we intentionally created to not only capture eel, but support their populations. I have quite a few more examples. I think I have time to go through some of them. But there's also some philosophical stuff I want to say at the end. But maybe I'll just do this last one, and then I'll get to the philosophical stuff. So the anthropogenic cane ecosystem of the American South, there is an indigenous bamboo species in what we now call the American South, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina. This was also a beautiful anthropogenic regenerative, I don't want to call it a farm, it's like a regional garden. And this bamboo was so important for the people. You can see this Muskogee man on the left working with the bamboo. And bamboo is similar to chestnuts. It can't grow too crowded, or you'll get what the middle picture has, where it's not getting any sunlight into the roots, and it'll choke itself out and it will collapse. So it actually depends on constant disturbance to open up the canopy of the bamboo, and they would also burn this bamboo a lot. So they would make all kinds of gorgeous things, and then they still do, out of bamboo, including basketry, arrows, flutes, mats, housing, adornments, rafts. It's kind of like bamboo today. You see bamboo forks and stuff. Like, you could just make anything out of bamboo. So this was really supporting the material culture of the people, this regenerative resource that was always there. And what's really amazing about the cane breaks is they call them cane. They don't call them bamboo, even though they are the same type of species. But the giant cane and the switch cane is they would burn it. And when you burn it, it creates, again, nutrient-dense soils. So it would burn it and it would rebound. And this cane is the type of species where if you burn it, it actually grows back 3 times as strong. So it's that resilient, species that when you burn it, it just gets stronger. And so what happened was the cotton industry came in and said, hey, look, wherever these cane breaks are, there's really good soil. So that's why the cane breaks are now less than 2% of their original habitat in the South, because they were largely replaced by cash crops, such as cotton and barley in the American South. And so that's how we have a little bit of a connection as Indigenous peoples with slavery in the South, because it not only enslaved beautiful human beings who didn't deserve that, it also wiped out our really important ecosystems. So you can see the human hand giving fire to the bamboo, and then the bamboo would actually feed the bison in the Southeast. We had, on the left-hand side, you see the bison belt. Again, bison weren't just in South Dakota and Montana, they were all throughout the Turtle Island, and including, as you can see, in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, we had bison. And my friend Marcus Cloud, who some of you may know, is reintroducing the bison to the Alabama right now. So then the bison would feed humans, humans would feed the bamboo fire, the bamboo would feed the bison, and so on and so forth. So there was this symbiotic relationship between the human beings, the bamboo, and the bison. And the byproduct of that was nutrient-dense soils. So some of the characteristics of indigenous regenerative ecosystem design are that they're usually holistic, they're landscape scale, they're ecosystemic, meaning they're not trying to pretend like they live in a vacuum, divorced from the forces of nature all around them. Rather, they're integrated and harnessing and facilitating and dovetailing those forces. They existed on millennial scales, meaning every single example I've shown you is at least 1,000 years old, the oldest being 6,000. They focused a lot on habitat expansion. So instead of caging your food and farming your food and forcing your food into a cage, you're making a home for your food, and your food will come to you. It's a very different thing. So like when we hunted deer, we weren't hunting wild animals necessarily. We were hunting animals that we attracted to us. And so it's sort of this in-between place. It's not quite domestication, but it's also not quite just letting wilderness go off on its own. It's somewhere in the middle where you're really working with land as if it is sovereign, as if the deer have their own sovereignty as well. So that's why you won't see any cages or fences in any of the systems I've shown. And then there's like a stewardship mentality. This notion that we're here to be warriors for the earth. I like to show this to show that it's not just in indigenous cultures in Turtle Island that we find this. We find the exact same thing in the Mesolithic era in Norway, which was thousands of years ago. So you'll read this quote, it's the same as the other quote almost. Anthropogenic burning was different from natural fires. The fires set by people was smaller and less intense. They were predictable, almost immediately productive, creating mosaics and a complex pattern of vegetation and of burnt and unburnt patches. Because they reduced available fuel, they provided protection against the disruptions of natural fires. So this is what ancient indigenous Norwegians were doing back in the day. They were doing the same thing. So they did it in Africa, they did it in Asia, they did it all over the world, where we find in the Pacific Islands, we see this phenomenon of human beings not just using fire as a regenerative tool, but being full participants in nature, not just, oh, here's how we conserve nature, we just draw a line around that part and we don't touch it. We can mess everything else up over here, but that part is nature. We've got to protect it. But our way of protecting nature was to get in it, roll your sleeves up, be a part of it, clip it, burn it, prune it, thin it, cultivate it, select certain species, be an active gardener in the land. So this sort of shows that we have the ability to be a gift, and we have the ability to be a keystone species. I think a lot of times we see ourselves kind of as like a virus or a pest or like this aberration on the earth, just this problem. But I've been really trying to encourage us to remember that that's not our true purpose. Our true purpose as Homo sapiens is to be a gift. And the Yoruba people say the word for human being is chosen one. And they say it not because we're chosen to dominate, but because Creator chose us to be the stewards, chose us to be the guardians, the landscapers, the warriors for these ecosystems, which sort of points to the idea that maybe, crazy idea, we belong here. Maybe we belong here. Yeah, and so maybe we're meant to be here, and that's what my people say. Our word for human being is Nahoka Diné, sacred earth surface walker. And when we call ourselves Diyin, that sort of means that, you know, we are sacred. We do belong here. We are a part of this tapestry. So, yeah, Indigenous regenerative ecosystem design. I've also called it Indigenous edible ecosystem design. I don't know. You know how scientific word. I'm just like, you look at this thing for 5 years and like, what is going on here? Because there's no English words for this really. Edible ecosystem design.
Edible, E-D-I-B-L-E.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I like to talk about the difference between the human hardware and the software. So the hardware is the human body. The software is the worldview or the culture or even the language that drives the human body. So the human body is not bad. It's really our worldview, the program by which we operate, the software that our hardware is operating on, that sometimes can become corrupted by fear, and sometimes can make us behave in silly ways. But indigenous cultures the world over have refined their softwares through trial and error. I always say we weren't just born this awesome, you know, we had to like mess up and hit our head against the wall for thousands and thousands of years to realize, oh wait, don't fight each other. Oh wait, don't kill each other. Oh wait, like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which the American democracy is modeled after. They only found this democratic technology because they were at war with each other for a long time. Revenge killings, blood killings. And the Tuscarora, the Seneca, the Onondaga, the Ganakahaga, the Oneida, the peacemaker came, a prophet, and he taught them how to live together and how to live in harmony. And now they have the great law of peace. And now they're not just not against each other, they're united, they're a confederacy, and they work together. And I'm hoping, hoping that's our future as well. I believe, in a way, I think it's the only future, because it's the only thing that works. So one of these softwares I like to talk about is the Anishinaabe 7 grandfather teachings. This value system, I think, is our software, the things that are important to us, right? So we have honesty, humility, wisdom, love, respect, bravery, truth. These are the 7 grandfather teachings that have their own names in the Anishinaabe language, also known as Ojibwe, also known as Chippewa. But these 7 grandfather teachings are the bedrock that every elder must teach to the children. And these 7 grandfather teachings are the value systems that govern everything in their world. And can you imagine what our world would look like if we were governed by these values as well? Our banking systems, our government systems, our family units, our personal relationships. If this is what our code of ethics, it would be a different world. And again, this software took probably a long time to realize that this was the best way to go. They have an animal that has symbolized each value for a long time, 2,000s of years. You can see Sasquatch is on there. So for anyone who was wondering, he is real. This is a thousands-of-year-old symbol. Honesty. But yeah, so there's a ruler software, which I think is kind of emblemized by this guy. This notion of like, I'm the ruler, I can do what I want. I can go to Mars, I can colonize Mars. This world is my oyster, I can do what this world is here for me to do what I want, to push the boundaries, to never have enough. This beautiful breath I have, these legs I have, not enough. I want more. Versus the Guardian software, which is, I think, emblemized by Colleen Sisk, an Winnemem-Wintu woman. I don't know if any of you guys know her, but she gets up every single day and fights for the salmon. That's her whole life. That's just all she cares about, because in her creation story, when humans were created, they had no voice. And all the other animals were like, oh, this one's gonna need a lot of help. And so salmon said, I'll help them. I'll give them my voice. So for that reason, humans have language. And therefore, the Winnemem people have to speak for the salmon. That's their covenant. And they've been protecting salmon in Northern California since day one. And in her left hand is a glass of water. She knows that that's also her covenant to protect the water. So these are the different ways we can go, you know, and obviously some people are going one way and some people are going the other way. That's okay. I mean, we have free will. And I think the folks who are going the ruler way are going to be humbled and are being humbled. The same time that DeSantis wanted to create a piece of legislation saying there was no such thing as climate change, he got hit with 2 hurricanes. And so, you know, I think there's no escaping natural law. And at the end of the day, this Guardian software, I believe, is our not only our truest purpose, but the only purpose that could really ever work on a planet this beautiful and in a world this sacred. So the last thing I want to talk about is the metaphor of the bird bath. This notion of giving a gift to a species outside of our own. Because all these examples you saw, the clam gardens, the pyro management, the chestnut management, the ahupua'a system, all of these systems are like little love letters to creation, right? The bird bath, we don't get anything out of it as humans, right? We don't get anything out of it. It's simply a gift to a species outside of our own. And that selfless gift to a species outside of our own, I think, is what elevates us spiritually. We look at St. Francis de Assisi, you know, who was a saint in Italy. He achieved his sainthood through the service to animals. And I think that, again, when we see animals and plants and fungi and microbes as unimportant elements in the backdrop of our own kingdom, we're not seeing the truth that these beings are absolutely equal to us and oftentimes more intelligent than us in different ways. And so it's really important for us to live as family with these things. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but to continue to create these bird baths for all species and all beings and help step back into our role as keystone species and to take up that mantle of being guardians and warriors for our plant and animal relatives. Because it's not just about saving human beings right now, it's about saving and fighting for and serving and protecting other beings. I always say just because they're not human doesn't mean they're not people. You know, they are people and there are people and we have to protect them. So some of the software that I saw across my survey of dozens and dozens of these beautiful case studies was respect, reverence, reciprocity, responsibility, relationality, or this notion that, you know, these are our relatives, and treating a horse the same way you would treat your grandfather, right? And I bet you probably wouldn't burn your initials into your grandfather's skin, right? So you shouldn't do that to a horse either, or a cow. That's my controversial opinion. That we should really treat these beings the same way we would treat our own grandfather, our own grandmother. And then once we do that, we'll truly be doing what we're meant to do. Restraint and regeneration. So the key takeaways here is that humanity has been a keystone species before. We could become one once again. Our technology doesn't need to change so much as our values do. It's like clam garden, you know, like if you put it in the hands of a capitalist, do you think it would last 3,000 years? Probably not. Because even though he or she is using the exact same technology of an intertidal rock wall, they're doing it for short-term profit. They have no desire to keep it going for the next generation. That's not important to them. So technological fixes won't save us, I think, as much as we garden our inner landscape, our heart, and debug our software. Can we ever hope to garden our outer landscapes properly and sustainably? We can take what we need while nourishing and regenerating Mother Earth at the same time. I think that's one of the greatest mythologies, is like, oh, either humans have to benefit or the Earth does. Kind of that conservation mentality, right? Like, just draw a line around it and don't touch it. That's a nature preserve. And then over here, we're just going to ransack it, right? But somewhere in the middle of not conservation, not exploitation, but co-creation with all creation. This praxis is scalable by following the leadership of unique indigenous cultures in unique ecosystems. That's the big question I always get. Okay, that's cool, Lyla, but will it scale? Will it feed 8 billion people? To which I reply, yes, it will actually feed them much better. They've done studies of, the Mebengokre people and their terra preta Amazonian dark earth systems, and put them side by side a colonial farm, intensive cow farm, and they outproduce. The Mebengokre people outproduce them by 5 times in terms of the protein that was generated. So yes, these are scalable. These are productive. They're more productive, and they're actually going to last longer on top of all that. So indigenous peoples throughout the Americas were huge populations, huge, supported by really effective food systems. So that's sort of my biggest message, is that this was not a scattered bands of half-naked Indians running around terra nullius. This was a densely populated, extensively managed continent. So I'm just so appreciative that you all took the time to listen to me. We're going to do like a little panel, but I actually wanted to flip the script a little bit, and instead of you guys asking me questions, I wanted to actually hear from you all. Not too long, give some time for your fellow friends. But like, what does this inspire from you guys, of your homes, of your teachings, of your grandmothers, your grandfathers? I selfishly want to learn from all of you, because I'm sitting in one of the most beautiful places of ancient indigenous regenerative food production. And so, I'll let Kamana, though, sort of welcome my co-moderator here. But thank you all so much for your time, and have a beautiful day.
I want to bring our brilliant, amazing director of Kahuli'au, Professor Kapua Sproat, and she's going to join Lyla in conversation. And so how about a hand for Kapua, everybody?
Yeah, happy to hear anything you might want to say, and then we can bring up whomever up to the microphones on the side.
Oh, that's great. I'm perfect at voluntolding people. I know lots of people here. No. First of all, thank you so much for your message of hope, really, and for the courage to speak for all of our relations. So much of what you shared, your lessons going forward, are things that resonate deeply with me, are practices that we have here in Hawaii. And so it's, or that I should say, well, that we have still, but that we had on a greater scale before. Because in many of the same ways that you mentioned, I mean, here we had, as Kamana likes to say, before the arrival of Westerners in Hawaii, we had more people living on every island than the island of Oahu.
Wow.
But at that time, we were completely self-sufficient. So totally different, yeah. And so that's where we need to go back to, right? Absolutely.
Thank you. I did not know that. Thank you. See, that's exactly what I wanted to learn from you all. So yeah, anyone truly, if you wanted to come up and share a story from your grandma or something of your heart, you're welcome to. I also do want to sing one song at the very end, so just let me know when I need to do that.
Just wanted to share with you a story from Los Angeles. So if anybody's ever been to Hollywood, you guys know about Cahuenga, the Topanga Valley. These are Tongva words. So I was dating somebody that lived in Downey, California, and there's a park near Downey that's 4 phases of California history. So there's like modern, ranching, orange groves, and then the Tongva. So it looks just like Polynesian Cultural Center, a Hawaiian, or a Polynesian village. Their poi was also nuts. And it just made me realize that all of that area, all the way till like basically the beginning of the Inland Empire, was wetlands. And when non-native people started managing it, they turned it into a desert. So just wanted to share that observation with you, that first off, the Tongva are basically Polynesians. You know, it's basically the northeast coast of Polynesia. The second thing is, you know, they made poi out of pine nuts. And the third thing is, you know, a lot of what this today boils down to is land back to indigenous people. And, you know, Los Angeles created its own water crisis because they were, well, it's probably the Spanish first, but, you know, the Americans second. And yeah, they created a desertification of the land. So that's all I wanted to share with you. You know?
Appreciate that. I have a good Tongva sister, Jessica Calderon. She'd be very grateful for your words. And your discussion of, you know, hulihia, these transformational moments, it reminded me, I did want to just speak on that just a little bit, is that indigenous folks, again, went through those already before Columbus came. So in Chaco Canyon, where my people are from in the desert, we had huge city, 5-story tall buildings, and we know through strontium isotopes that those logs that they used to make that city came from 100 miles away. So hundreds of thousands of logs were transported from 100 miles away in the year 1100. But we also know through our creation stories that this was a place actually of inequity, and that we had caste systems and we even had slavery, because it wasn't the high priests carrying all those logs. And we were not acting in a good way. And we say Creator gave us the gift of a drought in 1100 to get us to change our ways. And then when we left that place, all the archaeologists are like, where did they go? And they never ask us, right? And we're like, we know exactly why we left. Same with the Mayans. They're like, where did the Mayans go? And the Mayans are like, we're still here. We just don't live in those cities anymore. But anyways, the Mayans, you know, also same thing. They were playing God, and then they learned, we don't want to play God anymore. We want to go to the forest. The mound builders of the Mississippian cultures, they were building these huge mounds to get higher and higher to the face of God. And Marcus Cloudy told me when they finally got there, God said, what the hell are you doing? Stop acting like you're better than everyone, because only the high priest could live on top of the mounds. And they and through catastrophe that wiped out those mound building civilizations, and they dispersed into a Delwa system, which is a smaller decentralized form of government. The Muskogee still practice today. So sometimes our hulihia is challenging, and sometimes it is the greatest gift to go through these collapses. And it is how we learn. But I love what you said of how we learn is so important, right? That disaster capitalism, that's not learning. That's just, so I think we have to not only develop new ways of living, but develop how we metabolize catastrophe. That's gonna be really helpful, I think, in the coming century, because it's going down, right? It's going down all around the world. We just have a, you know, never before seen bomb cyclone in California right now, wiping out homes and stuff. So anyways, happy to hear.
I was actually moved when you invited us to say, what has our parents, what have our tutors told us? I have a 16-year-old daughter, and how I kind of remind her on a couple of things is, would Tutu be proud of what you're doing, or would Tutu be ashamed? Earlier, one of our brothers talked about the slippers, right? The slippers that went before us. I remember the slipper that taught me the lesson. But with that also too is, if I can, is that, you know, the original name of Kalanapua, which some people know as the rock-eating song that was written by the Royal Hawaiian Band, is actually translated as Famous Are the Flowers, the children. And the original title was Hele no ka poi aloha aina, a symbol of affection for the people who love their land. Additionally, when Mrs. Pendergrass actually wrote that, composed it for the Royal Hawaiian Band, it was actually after the band members who walked out from their jobs because this bandmaster demanded that they sign an oath of loyalty to the new provisional government. The bandmaster said they had to sign or they would be eating rocks. It is obvious that it was not meant to sell one's loyalty to their country for money. Because if we hold on to the land, the land will always feed us. So thank you, Dr. Kamana, the panel, for all of you. It's by feeding and breeding the next generation and remembering where we're coming from will take us where we need to be. Aloha.
Aloha, thank you. Hello.
Aloha. My name is Willow Chang. I'm really honored to be again in the company of such esteemed educators and activists and people who care, people who give a damn. I'm also happy to say this is the second of 3. I hope that this Piʻo Summit continues in perpetuity. It is wonderful. It feeds the soul in the most meaningful of ways. And you can hear I've got the wiggly voice because I'm filled with so much emotion right now.
Thank you.
There's so many things you said that have let the little synapses of the heart and the mind fire off, so I'm just going to share a few. I promise I won't take up the whole day. Something that I feel your whole presentation really was a reminder of is that Indigenous people are not meant to be in a people zoo. They're not a Smithsonian exhibit. They're not just something you see in an old issue of National Geographic. These descendants are amongst us today, and they continue and they find ways to thrive because it is the kuleana, it is their necessity. On my mother's side, we have Susquehannock blood. If you read about their fate, it is not a happy one. But seeing all of these people, it reminds me again the necessity to remember that those descendants are there. We are here in all of our shapes and forms and colors. So thank you for this gift. When you talked about the different types of food sources that have been nurtured, this is going to sound corny, so stay with me. But like you, I'm also a singer. I like to sing songs from the American Songbook. When you talked about clams, and when you talked about chestnuts, my whole life I've always felt drawn to these classic songs and the stories they tell and the connection that they have with my parents. But now I realize it is a deeper connection to the very food sources of the indigenous people. So when I think of the chestnut tree, the wishing well, in I'll Be Seeing You, or I think of cold Cape Cod clams against their wish do it from the Cole Porter song, Let's Do It, it makes me realize that the food sources of this Turtle Island are woven into our pop culture in ways that we may not have even known. And that is so beautiful. One last thing I want to say is this, because you clearly travel and you have been witness to so many different cultural differences and approaches. One of the things that concerns me deeply in Hawaii is that it seems like nobody knows how to cut trees anymore. I feel like there is a war on the sea and the ocean, and especially you see this manifested in the trees. You see people go and they lop off the top. Yes, I'm gonna foam at the mouth here. But whether it's a fiddle leaf tree or an indigenous tree, they just go there, they chop off the top and they just cross their fingers and they hope for the best that it's gonna grow back. And a lot of times it doesn't. And they don't even know when to prune the tree properly. They'll do it right before summer, and you're like, bro, what you doing? Chopping off the tree now right before summer? Bakatare, that's so stupid. I'm asking you, have you seen this? It feels like that people have lost the idea of what stewardship is. And you had mentioned this idea that, okay, this part is okay, we're gonna save it, this is the tree museum, and the rest of it, good luck. Chop down that mango tree and put concrete or put gravel because the tree make too much trash. You have heard this. And this is happening. They cut down the lychee tree, they cut down the mango tree, they cut the avocado trees that give sustenance, that also give stories and shade and homes for birds and things to eat. Have you seen this, or is this exclusive to Hawaii? I don't think it should happen anywhere, but I'm just wondering, have you seen this?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's this advent of like the English garden. You know, it's in a lot of the landscape architecture, it's devoid of edible species usually. It's more about making it look ornate. And yeah, I've been to a couple landscape architecture conferences lately because of my dissertation. I guess they thought I could contribute something there. And I'm just like, oh wow, this is just like the English garden we're recreating. I'm like, why? Like, can we make this edible? Like, why not? So yeah, definitely, it's a ubiquitous thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. There he is.
I see Kapua looking at me planning, so I gotta come up. No, but as I was watching your presentation, I see plenty of you in me and all of us, like we're the same. But I also was astonished by what was happening and amazed by the technology that was there. And then I started thinking, I was like, wow, this is so amazing. And then some kind of sadness came over me. Because we're not supposed to be astonished and amazed if we're still there doing them. Just like Olelo. I hear the old folks say, oh, look at the kids, so amazing that they can speak Hawaiian. If we was all talking Hawaiian and that was our language, we wouldn't be amazed at each other. That would be our language, speaking all the time. So these technologies and stuff that was there thousands of years, we lost. And so now we are amazed and we're astonished at it. And we should be. But if we're still practicing, if we wasn't disrupted, I see it like this. My grandfather, consecutive generations, he's supposed to be better than his grandfather if we're learning every single generation. We're supposed to be better than the next generation every single time. Well, we had on cut in that learning, and we fell backwards, and now we're astonished what they could do. You guys understand that? We shouldn't be. And so now we gotta find a way to get back to that point where we hold these things precious, but we're not amazed at it because this is how we live, this is what we do, this is ingrained in us. So I just want to say that. And don't look at me, you already.
I'd like to ask a question. I have a language and culture background, and many years ago I promoted tarot festivals for 10 years from Wynwood Community College. And the last maybe 15 years I've been involved with ocean, healthy ocean issues, so land and sea, but for the purpose of emergency preparedness, so food security. So with that background, I want to ask the question, in your cultures, what kinds of, if any, recording of oral history, because Hawaiian culture and I believe most of the American Native tribes have a oral history and then family stories. So what kinds of recordings of those histories are being done that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I come from the Diné nation. We're also incorrectly known as Navajo, but we are the most populous nation in the mainland. And we are fortunate to have all of our stories still being spoken. Not all of them, many of them. And we're fortunate to have a really strong presence. But there's 573 different nations federally recognized, and then there's another 200 that are not federally recognized. So you have 800, nearly 800 communities that are having their own situation. And I've seen everything from my friend Desiree Harp from Mishwal Wapo Nation in Northern California going to listen to her grandmother on a wax recording because that's the only thing left of their language. It's the only thing left. And they're having to try to write new songs, and I've seen that all the way to the Miamia that I showed you with their grass burning moon. Their whole language was translated into the Bible by the Jesuits. So their language died, no speakers. And they're currently resurrecting it, ironically, from the Bible. And they're succeeding in that because they have recordings as well, so they know what the phonetics are that the Jesuits wrote down, how it sounds. So when I went to see them in Ohio, they were speaking Miamia. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And to him, it's not only about generating fluent speakers. That is a goal, of course. But he said, even just teaching our kids a few words connecting them to their ancestors. Obviously, God willing, we can do much more than that. But he said it's not just about generating fluent speakers, it's about using the language as a thread back to their identity. So I've seen everything in between. And then you have my people who have thousands of speakers, they're still doing pretty well. But a lot of our stories are recorded in the songs. So we have songs that take 8 days to sing. And so we have a lot still recorded. But I think to his point, I think what I'm now wanting to do is take these out of the spoken realm and into the action realm. And I no longer can go around and give talks anymore. I'm going to still do that, but it used to be what I only did. Now I can't not generate food warriors in my community. Help the youth create their food plans, help them get into the fish ponds, help them get into the taro patches. Even if I'm just helping 10 kids get into the cornfields of my people's land, that's more valuable to me than maybe 10 speeches that I give, because I want to get the people, all people, back into the land. And even if it's little baby steps, we all need to start planting seeds, literal seeds. We all need to take these voice recordings and put them into action. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes to mind.
And what about Hawaii in terms of recording the oral or the stories of the elders? Do you know anything about that, or?
Me?
Yes, you're from Hawaii.
I am from
Yes.
Hawaii. So there's a lot of oral histories that are recorded in different places. The Bishop Museum has some. Many of the older museums in different communities have them. I saw Kavika Tengan here earlier. Where did he go? There's an oral history project here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And we have many, Auntie Davy, Craig, House, Kavika Tengan, who are actively doing this work now in the community. So there's a ton of it. I think there's a lot of important questions and issues, especially with all of our stories that are being maintained in different places and in museums, for example, about intellectual property issues and about who actually should be taking care of that and having access to that. But we're fortunate that we do have those recordings of specific places, and that we also have so much, I think, in our newspapers. For me, that's a real treasure trove of aloha aina and of our practices.
One last thing. I live in Seattle, and I come back and forth to Hawaii. And I've been reading a lot about ahupua'a. And during the time I was designing and working in taro festivals, I distributed information about ahupua'a that I had been told about. And then lately I've been reading a lot about ahupua'a. Even Sea Grant has an ahupua'a context. So I just wanted to plant a seed. The people that are living in their area, they have stories. I would assume many people haven't left. So what about the stories of ahupua'a? Because what I've read is every site is so different. So recording in your turf, in your community, just want to plant that seed.
And that is some of the work that folks like Kavika Tengan and the Oral History Project here at Auntie Davy and Craig folks are actually doing. So there are people doing that work now.
Great, thank you.
Mahalo.
Thank you. And I guess we only have 5 minutes left, so if it's okay, I think I'm going to sing the song, if that's okay. I'm so sorry. I was curious to hear. Yeah, but here we go. Okay. Yeah, usually this is helpful to people on their journeys, so that's why I wanted to sing it. But this is a song that got to write with my ancestors and hopefully to help us, carry on strong. So. Indigenous people, shine your light, we are equal, yeah, yeah. I remember the days when our prayers were illegal. I remember the days when being Indian was lethal, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had a rough past, but get ready for the sequel. Get ready for the glorious comeback of our people, oh, yeah. Rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I could feel it in my heart, can you feel it in your blood? I could hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. With forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as my arrows, pull it back and let it go. I watch them fly like sparrows. Have hope, have hope. With compassion as my shield and faith down to our marrow, we will walk the pollen path even when it gets narrow. Yeah, yeah. Resurrect, yes, you can bet that we seen the single mama raising children on the res. We seen domestic violence tear apart what we have left. We seen the alcohol take it all and leave us dead. We've seen the children take their own lives when they can't take the dread anymore. No, we can't take the dread anymore. No, we won't take the dread anymore. 'Cause we can't take the dread anymore. Yes, it's a war, but we've seen it all before, and now we know we can change it, 'cause that's why we were born. We know we are the ones that we have been waiting for. Yes, we are the ones that Grandma has been praying for. So rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I could feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I could hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up. Pueblo hermoso, levántanse, es nuestro tiempo. No tienes que esconderte más, porque ahorita es nuestro tiempo. This next verse is in Spanish to honor all the indigenous peoples who live south of that imaginary border that has divided a continent that was once very much connected. Mujer indígena, tú eres tan sagrada y traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía. A pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra, respetamos tus ancestros y la suya cultura. Hombre indígena, tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive. A pesar del abuso de tu raza venerable, yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus padres, guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz. Sí, no vamos a escondernos más. We are warriors of love. We are warriors of peace. And we will not hide ourselves anymore. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. Hey, hey. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to spend some time with you all. You're so beautiful. And to be in the Aina with the Kanaka Maoli is a huge, huge honor and a blessing. I always say I will never come to Hawaii unless Kanaka Maoli invite me. That's my promise to myself. And so thanks for inviting me.